Hello, everyone. After the interview, we decided to create this presentation on how we can best improve results within the Forest Company.
The main issues we believe that Forest Group has is lack of trust, healthy conflict, and attention to results that lead to inefficient results that they are producing.
Real quick before we get into our suggestions, we wanted to do an overview of the 5 dysfunctions which you read about. Just overall, we want you to remember that as each of these dysfunctions improves, the others will follow. For trust, this is just the confidence in team members and their peers that their intentions are good and that there's no reason that they need to be careful or cautious around the group. For conflict, it's important to remember that there will always be conflict. There is no progression without conflict. And that means that it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's important to push through being uncomfortable, allowing yourself to be uncomfortable so that you can work through those issues. As for commitment, without any commitment in the company, the employees won't be willing to put their best effort towards the organization. So it's important to find ways to help them buy in to the cause to see the best success that the team can have. For accountability, each member on your team has their own roles, and it's important, it's crucial even for them to be able to fulfill those roles, even if that means that their peers may need to call them out from time to time. And as for inattention to results, it's really important that the team is focused on collective goals. They need to care about the team's success more than their individual success, and having specific objectives and clear outcomes to help guide their actions will be an important way to do that.
Alrighty, the first dysfunction we wanted to cover to improve the team performance would be trust. As you saw from the last slide, trust is the foundation for the building blocks that all team activities are built upon. First, we will cover what is wrong within the organization, which there is a major lack of trust within the organization that can be seen with multiple instances. There is also a lack of vulnerability-based trust, which is when the team members are comfortable being open and exposed, as well as there is also a lack of predictive-based trust, which is built over time from experience. For example, people saying what they are going to do. As a leader, vulnerability trust begins with you showing that you're vulnerable to your team. In the following slides, we will first cover the solution for how we are going to fix the problems within the Forest Group and why we believe all solutions will be effective in laying down corrective action.
There's a few examples of lack of trust in the Forest Group, such as the lack of organizational trust of Jill feeling like she has to do everybody else's work. She shouldn't be having to feel like that, but she is, and that's just showing that she's not trusting the other teams and departments to get their work done. Also, as previously defined, vulnerability-based trust. There seems to be self-preservation going on where the older generation that you have is trying to make sure that they're not outdone by the younger generation. And that leads into predictive-based trust, where it seems like the older generation, again, doesn't respect the younger generation because they believe that they were there longer and they know more than the younger generation. Here are some ways that we believe will improve these issues that the team is having. First being team building. This is the first thing you need to do. Preferably, it needs to be off-site, as if you're getting away from the work environment, it's easier for people to open up with each other. This is also where trust is going to be kicked off. They'll start talking like people rather than coworkers, and which leads to them bonding more and creating a deeper relationship. This is also where you need to state what trust means to you as a leader. You have to put that out there for the team to hear and start to understand so they can start some buy-in that will come later on. This is also where you need to start being vulnerable with your team. Vulnerability starts with you as the leader. So you don't have to be super mushy, but you need to start with opening up to your team about at least what the team means to you and why you love this team. The second tool we have for you to use is creating norms. This will create expectations on how you should treat each other and what you expect of each other going forward. Also, creating rules of engagement on how goals and conflict should be handled in the future. You also need to create the expectation around trust. Starts with you again. You have to start trusting your team so they can start trusting you. Another great tool for trust is the personal history exercise. After team building and norms have been established, you can open up and become more vulnerable with your team, as there's a basis of trust there. You can, in a meeting, to begin the meeting, you can go around and ask everyone a hardship they had as a child and how they overcame that. That can get very emotional and you be very vulnerable, but it would also create a higher level of trust within the team and a better understanding of everyone with each other. This also has to start from you. You need to be the first one to be vulnerable and explain your experience. Lastly, the team effective exercise. This must be done later in time when trust has been established and there's a strong basis of it, because this can be very hurtful to some people if that trust isn't established. This exercise is basically, again, in a meeting, everyone goes around the room and says a strength they believe everyone else in the room has. They then again go around the room, this time saying a weakness everyone has. Hearing this can help the team, one, understand their strengths and weaknesses and where they need to improve on, that everyone has something to improve upon and nobody's perfect. And it's okay because we are all human.
In order for teams to work more effectively, they need to trust the character and the competency of their peers. This is shown in the slide. And as mentioned before, they need to be confident in the intent of the people they are working with. And they won't be able to do that if they aren't creating connections with their teammates. So the first bullet point, team building, this is important because whether they're spending time together away from work or even just messing around and having fun within the workplace, either way, they're building connections, and those connections will translate into a relationship further down the road. These connections in this relationship will cause them to be more willing to share more information with each other, to work together better, and the overall morale in the business will be heightened. Creating social norms, building psychological safety. What social norms will help build a foundation and be a good guide for how situations should be managed within the company. By creating these rules, team members will better navigate how they can interact with each other, and this will allow for more psychological safety in the organization, which will help them build more trust, and then you can trust that they will come to you with their own issues and problems, mistakes, questions, anything that might be hurting the organization. A personal history exercise, I believe that this starts with you, Joe. As a leader, you need to be the first one to be vulnerable and to share those experiences that you had and how they affected you. This is important because it creates vulnerability. This is the first step to gain a greater appreciation for each other, build some empathy, be more open-minded as to why people may act the way they do or why their personality may be a certain way that you don't necessarily agree with. So starts with you, be vulnerable with your team, and you will see that coming back to you as a result. As for the team effectiveness exercise, this is a great way to build predictive trust. As they go through and highlight each of their strengths, it helps team members see how they are contributing to the team. These success lines, as they were described, increase trust in the competency of their team, which will be important when working with the older versus the younger generations in your business. As they move further along and they're starting to build more trust, and you may decide to go through and discuss weaknesses on the team, that will also be a huge way to increase vulnerability on the team, as they'll be forced to kind of be open-minded and interact in an uncomfortable way with their teammates. to learn more about how they are helping and hurting the team.
The second dysfunction that we chose to cover was the lack of healthy conflict within the organization. One of the largest problems is that leadership within this organization is very conflict avoidant, which creates the problems that the team currently has. The main problem is that there is more affective conflict than cognitive conflict, which cognitive conflict leads to better results than personal. In the following slides, we will cover how we are going to fix problems within the organization and why we believe these exercises will lead the organization to become more efficient and effective with conflict. So within the organization, here are some examples of unhealthy conflict. People talking negatively behind each other's back instead of getting to the source of the problem. Joe and Jill's personal negative conflict over her not getting the carrier program written down or developed in time. Joe avoiding the soft and fluffy conflict because he wants group consensus, which is not always a good thing. You want everybody to be heard and different ideas. Then finally, the tension between the age group shows that they are uncomfortable having healthy, productive conflict. They would rather just ignore the problem entirely or personally attack each other based on their beliefs.
So how can we improve and increase healthy conflict within your organization? First of all, coaching conflict. This is on your end, giving tools and advising your team on how to manage conflict, how to handle being uncomfortable, and allowing them to work through it themselves with your advice, but rather than just solving it for them. And secondly, to celebrate healthy conflict, praise it, whether that be individually or within the group. Let them know that this is the kind of conflict that you want to see in your organization when it happens. And in order to do that, I believe it starts with you. You need to be the first one to embrace that uncomfortable nature of conflict, lead by example, and become a model of healthy conflict for your team. Second, personality assessments. This is just an assessment answering questions to help you and the rest of the members on your team better understand the emotions, the thought processes, reactions of each team member, and it just gives you insight as to why they might react a certain way when encountering conflict. Third, creating conflict norms. I think this is huge. And what norms are is like rules or expectations that the group works together to create, and they agree to follow them when they're engaging in conflict. And fourth, using the conflict resolution model. This model, as shown in the slide, it can help you characterize any obstacles or your conflict that your team is going through. As you look in the middle, you can kind of see that they're more factual, a little bit easier to work through that conflict, whereas as you move to the outside, they're more individual and personal, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult for employees, team members, groups to work through and overcome that sort of conflict. But this model just helps to identify which type of obstacle your team is working through so that they can determine the best way to work through it.
In the previous slide, Celine went over the tools we believe would be best used to help fix some of these problems that the Force Group has. Here are some more of an in-depth of why this would work. Coaching conflict. Conflict helps teams perform better. It helps them push through and get new ideas and maybe think of something that they would have never thought of if they didn't have conflict before. If the team can't push past the conflict, they will be remaining in the norming stage and they won't be able to see the results in the end, which means they won't become as successful as they think they need to be. Coaching conflict will actually help push your team in a healthy direction to have healthy conflict, to be able to create new, bigger, better ideas and create success that maybe was never even thought of before. Secondly, the personality assessment is very critical to understanding conflict. Conflict can be a very touchy issue, and if you don't understand each other and you don't have the trust with each other, you won't understand where the other person is coming from. The personality assessment is there to help you understand where others are coming from. For example, you might think someone is rude and abrasive towards you because you might be taking it personally. But as time goes on and you start to understand that person, you realize that they're just a direct person, and your interactions with them have nothing to do with you, but more to do with them as a person. This can help create better communication grounds for the team as a whole to understand where that person is coming from versus taking it more personally before thinking about these assessments. Lastly, about this, sharing the assessment is very critical and beneficial when it comes to conflict, because other people understanding their teammates and where the conflict is coming from and how they personally take it can help create a healthier conflict. For example, in our group, we went over some of our personality assessments, and we learned that one of our team members needs to have a more gentle approach when assessing conflicts because of her childhood and her experiences. And we understand that, and that's how we go about conflict with ourselves. Creating conflict norms is the third one we have. And in my opinion, the most important one we have. Having a guide to fall back on that everybody agrees with when dealing with conflict is critical, because without those norms, then people will just start being rude and abrasive to each other. Having those norms also allow conflict to arise and have the team navigate it in a healthy way. This will also lead to being able to disagree with each other and come out with a resolution rather than keeping on disagreeing with each other. Also, with these norms that you create, you have to go over them at the beginning of every meeting so everyone is reminded in case conflict does come up and how they should handle it going forward. As a group, we strongly encourage you to create conflict mining as one of your conflict norms. This is when someone in the meeting, it could be the same person or it could be someone different every time, depending on who's comfortable with it, looks around the meeting and makes sure everyone seems to be in agreement with it. If someone seems to not be in agreement with it due to their body language or anything, they ask that person if they have anything to say or if they might disagree with what has been talked about. This will lead to people feeling heard and appreciated, along with making sure feelings aren't getting bottled up inside and spilling over later. It will make sure that everyone believes that they have a voice and that they are heard. This will also help with the talking behind each other's backs, because if the issue is brought up during the conflict in the meeting and they felt heard about it, there is really nothing else to say afterwards when talking about what happened if they didn't get their ideas in or anything. Lastly, the conflict resolution model is a great tool to have. It helps define the issue. It creates the condition for the team against the issue rather than the team against the team. It can also define where this issue is stemming from. For example, if it's an informational obstacle, then we know that there's a block in information cascading down, or we're not communicating the information well enough. This can help fix the issue. Similar situations in the future to help avoid an informational obstacle like this again if we know what is causing the problem from the get-go. It is also important that the team knows this model so they can understand where the issue is coming from, and it's not just you as a leader telling them, as that can also create some issues. And it also helps them understand that if the issue is coming from somewhere that they stem from, that they can help fix that problem rather than not knowing if they were even the problem to begin with.
Inattention to results was another issue that we wanted to highlight within your organization. Without clear and specific team goals to work toward, the team may be working in circles to try and help the organization. They may not be motivated because they don't know what their objective is, or they may be motivated but they're working toward the wrong goal and not necessarily helping the business in the way that they need to. The first thing that we noticed was that there is a very high financial focus which is great. It is important to focus on your financials and make sure that your organization is doing what it needs to do financially. But if that is the only focus and the main focus, then the individuals aren't going to be working how they need to be within the organization. There's a lot of focus on one-on-ones, helping the individual, which again is great, but we need to make sure that there is a team goal, a connection, and one clear way that the team can work together to achieve the goals of the organization. Another issue that we notice is a lack of follow-up. It's important to have these attention to results, because if they're not following up with changes being made or information being shared, and no one is really making sure, holding anyone accountable to taking those new actions, then they will never be taking steps towards the goal that the business wants to achieve. So what can we do to improve and put more attention to our results? First of all, I think focusing more on just one-on-ones. Yes, the individual is important, but the team and the organization working together as a whole is what's going to bring more success to the Forest Group. Don't focus quite as much on financials. Again, yes, financials are important, but there are other things that you can create goals around to drive the progression of your team and help them advance. Again, find what drives your team, whether that be incentives, goals, whatever it is, what motivates your team to work towards a goal. And then fourth, place a scoreboard in a public place. Like I said, create a goal, not necessarily a financial goal, but a goal that the entire team can buy into and that they're committed to, and create a scoreboard that will show their progression and put it in a public area so they can see their progression all the time and other people can see it, to kind of drive in that accountability and push them to work faster and more effectively toward the goals of the organization.
As talked about by Celine in the previous slide on how to improve inattention to results, we will discuss why this is important in this section. Firstly, you need to focus on more than just one-on-ones. It is extremely important to incorporate team progression meetings to get better levels of commitment and buy-in from the people. It is also important to focus on making sure the group can hold each other accountable for the results that they get collectively. And lastly, focusing on one-on-ones shows that you don't value everyone's work within the team the same. All right, secondly, you need to start focusing on team goals instead of just the financial side of the business. This is important because many people are driven by different factors, and only increasing financial growth is one way to end up being blindsided by another problem. You have to create team incentives to better motivate your team and improve commitment, which leads to better results. Finally, creating team incentives can help the team bond and focus on nurturing each other to meet the goals that they have set so they can get the incentives that they formed as a group. Thirdly, you have to find what drives your team. This is important because you have to create a goal that people can buy in and work towards. This is where we create the thematic goal that you will see in the handout or a following slide that will be explained by Bree. You have to find what will make people persevere through the hard times in order to keep the team's goals alive. Then lastly, you have to put a scoreboard in a public place. The reason is because it reminds people what they are working towards. Every day when they are walking by, they know what they are working towards, they can see that, and they can get more buy-in. It is also important because you can update it so people know the progress that is being made towards the ultimate or the final goal of the group. And then lastly, it allows other teams or other people within your organization to see that you are working in unison towards a final goal and you are being an effective team.
We wanted to provide you with an example of a thematic goal. Of course, this isn't related to your organization, but we wanted to provide an example to go through with you. This was a gymnastics team. They wanted to reduce their injuries within 7 months because injuries can play a huge role in how the team performs through their season. And so as you can see here, they created a few defining objectives that relate directly to reducing injury, and highlighted them here. For example, address the importance of injury prevention. They noticed that there was a lot of dragging feet when it came to injury prevention and athletic training, whatever they needed to do. And so they made it a point to educate the team on why it's important. And as you move along, you can see that there are other ways that they wanted to reduce injuries. And then underneath that is some standard objectives. And these are objectives that are overall for the whole organization, goals that the company will always stick to continually work toward. And these objectives will help guide the actions of the individuals to improve the performance of your company.
Lastly, we're going to be leaving you off with a scoreboard we've done for another team. As you can see, their goal was reducing injury. You can also see the areas they need improvement on are average, and if they were excelling at any, there would be a gold medal next to it. It is a good idea to create one of these with your team and put it in a public place like Wade has said, so the team knows their progress and their goals they are willing to work towards. It's also very beneficial if they can see it every day so that they are always reminded that they can improve and the goal is still there.